Cool. Hello, everyone. Yeah, what's up? Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today, we're doing a Chinese dish called Wusiu Tofu, which is often confused for another dish called shao tofu, which we're going to explain in a second. If you're not familiar, Wusiu Tofu or Wusiu Tofu and shao tofu are both very, very similar. Essentially, what it is a fried tofu that has been braised in dark soy sauce braise, usually involving oyster sauce too. Today we're going to do it with the classic three things that you will see me use all the time, which are dark soy sauce, black vinegar, and oyster sauce, all in conjunction. This one, if you're interested, is part of a new series that we just kicked off that's dedicated to doing vegetarian recipes, because lots of people have been asking me about fun or interesting recipes for vegetarians, which we don't do super often because the vegetarian food is not really common in most Chinese food. Chinese people love meat, so stuff like that all popping up over on the YouTube channel. Lots of fun new stuff coming out soon. I picked this one. This is actually one of my favorite dishes to eat. One of my favorite preparations of tofu, mostly because I have found that super often, just generally when I look for like tofu that comes up in like classic preparations of vegetarian food, you will often see tofu used as like a substitute for meat, which I think is like the first big mistake for any time that you're trying to create vegetarian recipes. So we're going to take a look at how I like to prepare tofu and why that's so different from what it looks like when it's prepared for as a meat substitute, which looks really, really different. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'll do my best to answer everyone. Also, if you're looking for it, those recipes, they always live over on the YouTube channel, so that all lives, if you're watching on it, the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. Lots of fun stuff coming up. Cool, so kicking off first, I just finished cutting, I should probably put this away. That's 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic. I'm gonna need 3 of these. Yeah, that's 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic. Which we are smashing with the flat side of our knife, as we often do, and then giving it mostly just a rough chop. And I'm going to set this aside as one of our aromatics. So today we're going to do a pretty classic combination that you'll see me do in a lot of different recipes, and that is essentially going to be 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, 1 inch of this is fresh ginger, and then what we're going to do is separate the whites from a couple of green onions, and those are going to be our aromatic today. So lots of things that we're going to be doing today are like probably techniques that you will see in a lot of the really common, or like a lot of the really comfortable Wu Can Cook recipes, where you'll see me like kind of operating in my comfort zone. That's because lots of stir fries are assembled in the same way. So yeah. Yes, Lurkers, I love that username. Did we marinate the tofu? No, and I'm going to explain why. Lots of people ask me that too, actually, is like, do you need to marinate the tofu to make it taste like anything? And it kind of like falls in line with one of the big problems that I have with tofu, the way that it has been prepared when it's used as a meat substitute is that lots of people think that you should marinate tofu. But the more that I have tried marinating tofu, the more that I found that it doesn't do anything because tofu is not meat. So when you marinate it like it is meat, it doesn't really impart any flavor because tofu is not porous. It doesn't really like take on much flavor when you marinate it. So the way that we're going to approach it by frying it in a shallow fry, and that's going to be where all of our texture comes from. So that's how it gets really, really crispy, and that's like really, really deeply crisped up piece of tofu, sort of like how we would approach like a piece of General Tso's chicken, where we're like deep frying something to a really, really crisp quality, and then for a short amount of time braising it in some kind of sauce today. So what we're going to do is give it a really, really deeply crisped up quality in that short or shallow fry, and then follow that up with a really, really like deeply umami braising sauce, and that's I think the real key to a tasty piece of tofu is making sure that that sauce sticks to the tofu. That's another problem that I have all the time with vegetarian approaches to like stir fries, is that the sauce doesn't have good cohesion to the pieces of protein that you're trying to incorporate, and then you get this like a really, really tasty sauce that doesn't necessarily stick to the protein. So you have like a lot of sauce that kind of just sits in the rice, and then like it's on top, which is like not very productive or useful or tasty at all. So we're gonna take a look at all that stuff. Yeah. Cool. So next up, what we're doing, this is our green onions. I'm separating these by their whites and greens. So here's our whites and here's our greens. Lots of people ask me like, where does the greens and the whites start? So where does the whites stop and the greens start? I don't really think that it's that important that you are like super accurate with where do you make that cutoff. The main difference being that the whiter that the green onion gets, the more like abrasive and like onion-like it's going to behave. So like it's this like really, really white portion down here, if you were to just like bite into it raw, it would kind of just taste like biting into a raw onion. So that's definitely the sort of thing that we don't want just sort of like floating around in our stir fry raw, because it would be really, really abrasive, sort of like if we were to throw a raw onion into the stir fry. So what I like to do is separate it. We're going to take these whites and then slice them super thinly, like so. And then these are going to head into our stir fry with our aromatics. So here's our whites. Try not to make a mess. I'm making a mess anyway. And then super often you will see me using 3 elements that kind of go, all 3 of them will go together. So this is our garlic, our ginger, and the whites of our green onions. And we'll use these 3 elements as like sort of the foundational starting point for a lot of umami. So those go together quite often. How do you get really good with cutting your fingers with your fingers back? Yeah, so that's really tricky. It took me a little while. It kind of just takes some practice. At first, it's gonna feel like super uncomfortable. So when I wasn't really paying attention to how I was chopping, I was doing a couple of things differently. So I would always like put my fingers down like this, and I would also, the other big thing that I used to do a lot is put your finger up over the knife like this, because this just sort of like feels like a natural way of using the knife, is just putting your hand. I guess it makes sense because ergonomically the way that the knife is designed, it calls for you to put your hand on the handle, because that would make sense. And then what you're gonna want to do is try and put your finger on the edge of the blade like this, because it just sort of feels like you have more control over the knife. But it actually kind of hinders your ability to like move the knife around, because it's like locking your wrist into one position. So what you actually want to do is put your finger closer towards the hilt of the knife, so like more like this, so like we're pinching the edges here. And it's also the reason why like a good chef's knife, you'll see it has like a nice taper right here, because it's meant for you to pinch right there. And then we hold it like this, and this gives us a little bit more control so that we can slice with more control. What gets really uncomfortable and like kind of takes a little bit of practice is getting this part down, and this part also, by the way, gets a little bit more difficult with the more stuff that you try and cut all at once. So like I'm chopping 4 green onions at once, and this is about as much green onions as I can chop at once before my claw technique sort of starts falling apart. So when we prep for our pop-ups and stuff, I have to we will chop like 10-15 pounds of green onion, and we have to chop them I have to chop them at least about 4 at a time, because after that the chops start getting sloppy. So it all kind of depends. It takes a little bit of practice, and then as you get used to it, you can do it a little bit faster and you can do more stuff at once. But that's sort of my maximum, is about 4 green onions at a time, and after that it just sort of falls apart, which has happened. So. But yeah, knife technique, it's just all about practice. And also also worth mentioning is that lots of people swear that you have to use the claw technique and you have to use certain techniques. But the reality is that you only have to do it if you want to chop really fast. So if you don't care about chopping really fast, you can absolutely just chop like this and it will be totally fine. Because as long as you're paying attention to where your fingers are, you're not going to chop your fingers off. It does mean that you're going to have to chop a lot slower, and that's usually what hinders people, is that you're trying to chop really fast. So if you don't care about chopping fast, not a problem at all. Just don't chop fast, and it won't be unsafe at all. Yeah, cool. But yeah, definitely when I was first starting out, it's super awkward and uncomfortable. All right, so next up, so we have 2 different veggies in saute today. One is going to be these carrots, and the other is going to be our green onions. What we're going here, so what I just finished doing is I just chopped off the tip and the root ends of our carrots. Don't have that. You don't. I like doing that because I find that as the carrot sort of tapers off on the end, I find that it's a little more bitter, and it's just generally like a taste of flavor that I don't like having in my stir fries, because I find that it just sort of well, maybe not obviously, but that tapered off end, that's the youngest part of the carrot, because it's the part that's in the soil the longest, which means that like anything else that is the youngest part of a vegetable, it's going to be the bitterest part. So I like to remove that part. You don't have to, but to my taste, it's super bitter, and I don't like eating it. Cool. And then the last thing that I like to do before we start chopping up our carrots is what I always do. You'll see me doing this with pretty much any time that we're cutting up carrots. Is I like to sort them by size, so like so. And this is going to help us kind of address the fact that the way that a carrot grows, it grows very unevenly. So it kind of is really, really wide at the beginning and then really, really narrow at the end, which poses this inherent problem that it makes it very difficult to get an even cut on your carrot, because if the carrot grows unevenly, then it's obviously going to chop unevenly too. So by sorting it by size, it kind of helps us pay attention a little bit more to how we chop that carrot. Yeah. It's also the other reason why when I chop up carrots and cooked ones, I like to do it on a bias like so, because it lets us just sort of start chopping a little bit differently as we get farther into the carrot, like so. So we can chop it in half, and then maybe pare down the bias a little bit to kind of address the fact that the carrot is getting a little bit larger, like so. Here's our widest bit of the carrot, so we're going to chop this all the way in half, and then continue with our bias, like so. So that's obviously, it's never going to be perfect, but this is probably the best approach that I've figured out how to get in getting an even chop on your carrot. Yeah, cool. Ooh, let's do these next before I forget. Have I taken any cooking classes, or just learn all this growing up? Yeah, mostly just growing up. I have not taken many cooking classes. I took 1 or 2 classes. But I would definitely not say that that's where my expertise in cooking comes from, is from school. None of the knowledge that I have comes from school, although I have been to a lot of school. I've mostly just self-taught and just a lot of watching. Yes. All right. So before I forget, this is should be about 10 shiitake mushrooms. These are really thin shiitake mushrooms, which is really useful. Also, the reason why I always buy really thin shiitake mushrooms is because they rehydrate really quickly. Also, our camera lens might fog up right now. Yeah, a little bit. I like really thin shiitake mushrooms because they hydrate. So these are going to rehydrate in about like maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that. This also gives a little bit more water. These are really that ends up being really useful because if you have super thick shiitake mushrooms, they can take a really long time. They might take like 25-30 minutes to rehydrate, which is really obnoxious if, for example, you forgot to hydrate them like I just did, and then you'll end up waiting for them to sort of like rehydrate. Also, the other like really terrible and dangerous thing is that if you've ever tried to cut a shiitake mushroom that isn't properly hydrated, it gets super dangerous because the knife won't go through it all the way, and then you'll end up like the knife starts like sliding around with the mushroom, and then you'll end up cutting your finger that way. So, yeah. Cool. Successful crowd. Yeah, what are we making? Hello to everyone if you're just tuning in. Today we're making a stir-fry dish that I've been eating since I was a little kid, which is called a Wusiu Tofu. Wusiu Tofu is, I believe, as far as I can tell, I've done a lot of research on this, and as far as I can tell, the internet is unclear on what the difference is between a Wusiu Tofu and a Hongxiao Tofu. But as far as I know, a Hongxiao Tofu is a deep-fried or slightly breaded and deep-fried tofu. That's sauteed and then braised in a dark soy sauce and oyster sauce base. The difference being that when it's deep fried and braised, with that breading, you get this nice chewy, almost like meat-like texture to it, because it has this very toothsome and chewy texture to it. Hongxiao tofu, as opposed to a Wusiu tofu, excuse me, as opposed to a Hongxiao tofu, is done in a shallow fry for a very crisp quality to the tofu. So which is what we're going to do today. It is not going to be meat-like, and it's going to be a lot crispier than toothsome today. And that's because of the way that we're going to fry it. And as far as I know, otherwise, they're essentially the same dish. Is the way that the tofu is fried is where it differs. So, is it Japanese? No, it comes from Chinese cuisine. I believe from Cantonese food. I might be wrong about that. Don't quote me. So most iconically, both tofu and Wusiu tofu. The way that we want to cut this tofu into squares like so. No cubes today. That I believe is just a presentation thing. I don't think it has much bearing on the way that the tofu actually turns out when you finish frying it. Yeah. All right, last up, or rags. Rags are gone. So last up, what we're going to do is assemble our sauce while we wait for those shiitake mushrooms to hydrate. So this is going to be our braising sauce, and as with a lot of dark soy sauce braises that you'll see me doing, we're going to use a couple of very commonly recurring things that come up in a lot of Wu Can Cook recipes. That camera is just going to keep turning off, by the way. I'm sorry if it does that again. So first up, for our baseline, this is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. And then rounding that out is going to be 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, or Chinese cooking wine. That's going to give us a little bit of brightness and acidity. Sort of like the way that you would use vinegar. Finally, last up are the big 3 things. Well, not last, but second to last are the big 3 things that we use in a lot of dark braises. You'll see it in more recipes than I can think of right now, but it's definitely in the pad see ew recipe, the pad kimao recipe. We used it in the Shanghainese braised meatball recipe. We definitely used it in the Hongxiao Tofu recipe. Basically anything that we're trying to get like a deeply caramel color to it, we're going to use these 3 ingredients, and this is 1 tablespoon of black vinegar, which is pretty similar to rice vinegar but has more of a malted sweetness to it. Then this is 1 tablespoon of oyster sauce, which again comes from the reduction of oyster. And again, also very malted in its sweetness. And then finally, this is 1 tablespoon of dark soy sauce. Again, malted sweetness. All right, last up, second to last. This is gonna be 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, and that's just gonna give us a little bit more of a nudge in that sweetness direction. And then lastly, is going to be 2 tablespoons of chili crisp oil, which lots of people think that lao gan ma or chili crisp oil is really hot because it kind of looks, you can see that it's very deeply red. It kind of has the appearance that it's going to be very hot, but I actually don't think that lao gan ma is super spicy at all. I find that it's more salty, more of an MSG quality to it than it does have heat. So I'm mixing that up. We're gonna set this aside, mostly just making sure that that sugar is dissolved. Yeah. What state do we live in? Yeah, I live in California, here in Oakland, actually. Here's my mushrooms, which is I live here in California, in Oakland. Our pop-up is based out of Oakland in the Alameda County, I guess, but technically mostly we're here in Oakland. So if you're looking for the Wu Can Cook pop-up, that's all over Oakland. Yeah. Cool. So last up, am I supposed to be slicing these? I forget. I'm gonna slice them. I forget if I'm supposed to be slicing these. Yeah, I'm gonna slice them. So I think in the earlier Wusiu Tofu recipe that I had done, we used whole shiitake mushrooms, which is definitely a big part of the way that Wusiu Tofu is presented. I actually find that that's a little bit obnoxious and a little bit, honestly, just difficult to eat because it's hard to eat a whole piece of shiitake mushroom. So what I'm gonna do is I'm slicing this up a little bit more thinly, and this is gonna be a little bit easier for us to bite into later on. Yeah. Am I a professional? Yes, I guess so. I run a catering company also called Wu Can Cook, and then we do a lot of pop-ups all around the Bay Area. So if you're looking for a pop-up, all of that information is on the website. So that's at wucancook.com/eats. We are wrapping up our stint at the Hayward Farmers Market this weekend. And then we'll be appearing at Federation Brewing next. And that's coming up on January 14th? Second Friday. I think we're doing second Friday at Federation Brewing. Coming up pretty soon. Yeah. Oh yeah, tempura chicken. Yeah, honey tempura chicken. That one was really fun. I haven't made that in a while. Maybe we should. But that was one of my favorites to do. Just like a really interesting way that was a really interesting and creative way of approaching honey sesame chicken, which was more or less did not really include that much honey in it, actually. I think it only had like maybe a 1/4 cup of honey, maybe even less than that. I think I had more sweet chili sauce than it did honey. One of my favorites for sure. Thank you though. Yeah, thank you for subscribing and doing the recipes. I always love seeing how folks do when they attempt the recipes. That's really hot. I probably shouldn't be sticking my hand in there. Yeah, I always love seeing how folks do when they attempt the recipes. So if you do take a shot at any of those recipes, feel free, definitely post some pictures over on the subreddit. That's really cool. That's at Wu Can Cook. All right, so here's our shiitake mushrooms. I'm gonna set this aside. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to slice these. I kind of forget. These are sliced into strips. And then very, very important, lastly, is that anytime that you're using shiitake mushrooms, but also especially when you're using shiitake mushrooms for things that are braised, like what we're doing right now, save this water. There's so much umami that is sitting in this water. This is basically how they make, like, anytime that you see a vegetarian version of like a fish sauce or an oyster sauce, this is what they use. They use this stuff. So don't dump this in the sink. Don't just toss this stuff unless you really have no use for it. You want to save this stuff because it's filled with flavor, and we want to save all of this. So this is heading into our braise later on, so absolutely do not dump this in water. That's the liquid gold. Yeah, oh, lots of questions. Your Hong Kong girlfriend wolfed it down. Nice. Yeah. Did we use extra firm tofu? Yeah. So today, I think it might have just been firm tofu, but it was definitely, in my mind, I think of tofu as either firm or soft. I know that is not true, but it's either firm or soft. I don't see a huge difference, at least here in America. By the way that you see tofu appear is usually either extra firm, medium, or soft, which is only 3 of the many categories that you will see tofu done. Most often you will see the term silken tofu thrown around, and that's actually not related to the quality of texture that the tofu has. It's related to how it's bound. So I think it has something to do with the way that it is bound together and made solid. To me, I use them interchangeably. I know that I shouldn't, but I oftentimes will use those 2 interchangeably. But today we're using firm tofu. You are, I believe, the way that you technically supposed to approach a Wusiu Tofu is done with silken firm tofu, which is a contradictory term, and I honestly have never come across silken firm tofu, at least not here in California, because that's such an obscure way of finding tofu. You will never see a tofu that is bound as a silken tofu, but also appear with a firm texture to it. So what we need in order to achieve the crispy fry that we're going to do is a piece of firm tofu, which is what we're using today. But a lot of that just has to do with the way that you would approach using the tofu. So today what we're going to do is shallow frying the tofu. If I was doing something more like a mapo tofu, I would probably treat that tofu a lot more differently. And when we do mapo tofu, for example, we throw it into the stir fry very late. It's like literally the last thing that goes into the stir fry. Which is essentially to say is that it's not really being cooked at all. It's basically just being tossed to combine. And the reason for that is because soft tofu is so delicate that if you throw it in too early, it's basically just going to start crumbling and come apart into the stir fry because of the way that you're tossing in the wok. So you don't want to throw soft or silken tofu or soft silken tofu into the stir fry too early, or it's going to start coming apart. So for that reason, we're using firm tofu. What we really should be using is firm silk tofu, but I don't know where to find that at all. Yeah, when you see silk tofu, it's so soft, it's almost like a liquid quality. That's my favorite thing to find. But actually, as far as I've read, that's not necessarily the only type of silken tofu. It's just the only type of silken tofu that you'll find here in the States, which kind of makes sense. Tofu not super big in the States, I guess. So. Okay, so over on the stove, I've got my wok heated up. What I just did, because I forgot, is I just opened up 2 of my windows, which is super important. Pretty much any time that you're stir frying, but most importantly when you're shallow frying and deep frying, because this thing is about to kick up a whole bunch of smoke. So before you start, if you're making this recipe, make sure that you throw your windows open, because that stuff is going to start smoking real bad. Oh, you used it in a tofu scramble once. Yeah, I mean, you could use firm tofu in a tofu scramble too, but yeah, that's definitely a good use, for sure. Cool. So over on the stove, I've got my wok heated up real hot, and then this is going to be some grapeseed oil, which we're going to use a lot of. So that's maybe a cup and a half of grapeseed oil here, and here's our long yao. So as far as I'm concerned, if we were doing a stir fry, that would be an insane amount of oil. You definitely do not want to be stir frying in that much oil. But think of it relative to how you would approach a deep fry. Normally in a deep fry, we would be using like half a gallon of oil. This is actually not that much oil at all in relation to how you would approach a deep fry. So next up, what I'm doing is I'm adding my tofu to the wok, 1 or 2 pieces at a time here. The reason that I'm adding this 1 piece at a time is because we want to make sure and pay a lot of close attention to the way that the tofu goes into the wok. So I'm making sure that our tofu is flat side down with the most amount of surface area, making contact with the surface of the wok. Yeah, I know how to do it. Usually I like to go for about 10 at a time here. This is, I think, 10. But we also have a weird number of tofus going on. We want to do is pay attention to make sure that we're not overloading the wok here as well. So I want to make sure that when we're working with our tofu, I'm going to do this in 2 different batches today. What I'm paying attention to is that with the amount of oil that we have in the wok, that all of our tofu remains submerged in that oil. If we put too much tofu in it, it's not going to end up shallow frying, and we'll just fry it. And in some cases, it might even burn. We don't want that to happen. You can't save it in Japan, yeah. That kind of makes sense. So also very important safety point to make clear is that tofu, kind of similar to a lot of meats, but tofu especially, is bound together with water, which means that when you throw it into hot, it's going to splatter quite a bit. So be very, very careful. Don't do what I just did. Use some tongs because this stuff is going to start kicking the oil up a lot. Which I realized I didn't do, so yeah. So I'm going to let this go. This will go in 2 different batches. It'll probably be about 5 minutes per batch here. And part of this kind of just comes from intuition, but what we're looking for is about 3 or 4 minutes per side. But more or less what I'm looking for, what I'm looking at is like the color of what's going on with the tofu right here. If you look closely, you definitely can't see it on YouTube. You can kind of see it on Reddit. Stove cameras tofu often blows out the white point on my stove cameras. But you can, if you were here, you would be able to see this parts of the tofu right here. All of these edges on the side start turning brown quickest. And then when you start seeing that browning up, that's generally a sign that you're getting pretty close to flipping that tofu over. I find that this is also true when you're searing things like chicken and stuff too. Kevin, do I ever bump the wok handle sticking out? Yes, all the time. It's actually the reason why I forgot to use it today. But it's the reason why I always insist on having a wok ring anytime that I'm doing anything with a large amount of oil. Because the round bottom wok sort of rolls around like this, and if you're not careful, you can knock the wok off of the stove, which I have done more times than I can count. So we want to be careful. I'm pretty sure I've even done that on a live stream before too. So we want to be real careful. Don't knock the wok over because it's really dangerous and you'll burn the crap out of yourself if that happens. That also reminds me though, so another very good, important, very useful point. Lots of people have noticed this is a rounded bottom wok, which means that obviously as the name implies, the bottom of the wok does not have a flat surface to it. It has a round surface to it, which gives us a slight advantage when we're stir frying because it helps us kind of toss a little bit quicker. But it's super, super useful in things like shallow frying, like we're doing right now. Because what happens is the oil, it starts pulling up really nicely right here at the edge of the wok, where it just like meets where the center of the wok kind of rounds out, which helps us do shallow fries in a lot less amount of oil. So if we were doing this like in say like a 12-inch cast iron skillet, for example, this would probably take closer to 2.5 cups of oil in order to achieve the same thing. So I love using a rounded bottom anytime that we're shallow frying for this exact reason. There we go. So I'm keeping an eye on the edges of my tofu, and when it starts looking nice and browned up, we're giving it a flip. And that's the quality that we're looking for here. There we go. Yeah. Cool, yeah. You love tofu, cool, yeah, I'm glad. I love tofu. I love too, to not to eat so much meat all the time. These last three are going slower than I'd like. All right. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Wusiu Tofu, which is a Chinese stir fry that is using a fried crispy piece of tofu, which is what we're frying up right now. We're doing it in a nice rounded bottom wok, which is going to give us a real nice advantage to doing crispier tofu in a shorter period of time. If you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about tofu or stir frying, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least entertaining to watch. As always, what we're cooking today has a recipe that goes along with it that always lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that stuff, definitely make your way over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. This particular recipe is one that came out last Friday. Those are out every Friday, by the way. So last Friday we came out with this recipe as a part of a new series that we've been doing dedicated to vegetarian recipes and like decently tasting vegetarian recipes, which I find are really hard to come by. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely head over to the YouTube. Check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. Lots of cool stuff coming every Friday. All right. Also, that's also where our concurrent live stream lives too. So this other stream next to me, that's what's going on over there. Yeah, what cooking oil are we using? So today I'm using grapeseed oil, but only because I forgot to buy more peanut oil. I will always say that you can wok fry in really any kind of neutral oil that's good for high heat, that has a high smoke point, I should say. So grapeseed oil is my favorite neutral oil. You can also use canola or vegetable oil. Grapeseed is more or less a form of vegetable oil. Any of those will be great. They're all very, very neutral and will give you decent results without smoking up too much. So mainly what we want to do is avoid things like olive oil or butter, stuff like that. That's not going to work well because it's going to burn, and then you're going to have a burnt quality to your stir fries because it's going to hit a smoke point too early, and then the wok fry is going to start burning the oil. What else? Oh yeah, very often you will see the use of peanut oil kind of thrown around a lot. Mostly that's mostly because it's very, very good as a complementary aromatic quality to a lot of things that are stir fried, which is why you see it used in a lot of stir fries so much. I don't necessarily think that you have to use peanut oil all the time. I think it's nice to have. My main gripe with peanut oil is that it's not a neutral flavored oil, which means that like if you only stir fry stuff, that's a really great oil to have because it's going to be really, really useful for the only thing that you cook. The problem being is that peanut oil is not super great for anything that's not stir fried, which if you're a normal human might end up being a lot of things. So like hash browns and scrambled eggs and other stuff like that. If you've got something that you don't want to be a stir fry, you're going to need some other kind of oil. So if you don't mind carrying a couple of oils in your house, that's why I often will have peanut oil and then also grapeseed oil and then oil. That peanut oil is for all of the stir fries. The grapeseed oil is basically for everything else. And then the olive oil is basically anytime that I'm cooking Italian food. So I always say is if you have the time to get it, grab some peanut oil. But before you do that, grab some vegetable oil or grapeseed oil or something that's neutral, which is going to be a little bit more applicable for everything that you cook, not just stir fries. It's also the reason why I've been out of peanut oil for quite a while and have not bothered to buy more of it. Mostly because I just forgot and don't find a need for it. Alright, so we're gradually getting there. Some of this is sticking, which I don't love. Also, part of it is I believe we overloaded the wok a little bit. That was maybe a little bit too many pieces of tofu going on in that stir fry. Again, you want to be careful and don't overload that wok because if you throw too much tofu in all at once, they're going to not only stick to the wok bottom, but they'll also stick to each other, which is not good. Yeah. Do I use oil for scrambled eggs? It depends on what kind of eggs. I mostly use butter. But I guess you could use oil for scrambled. Mostly what I think about when I make breakfast is hash browns. You don't use peanut oil for hash browns unless you want your hash browns to taste like peanut oil or peanut, which is not going to be fun. That's not going to be a good morning for you. But yeah, oil for scrambled eggs. I guess you could use oil. You're mostly going to need butter for scrambled eggs, though. Yeah. Yeah, you could use corn oil too. That corn oil is good for high heat cooking too, so that would work too. All right, so that's our first batch. I'm going to get this second batch going, and then we can take a look at the first batch. As you might notice, once again, our tofu is filled with water, which means that when I drop it into the wok fry, and that water starts making contact with the hot oil, cold water plus hot oil means oil splattering. So be very, very careful at this point. Use some tongs. Don't use your bare hands like I was doing earlier. That's dangerous. All right. So in the meantime, we can look on this camera. Here's our finished tofu. We have this nice crisp up quality to it, so it's very, very deeply crunchy. Has a so it is no longer floppy. Has this really, really crisp quality to it. Sort of the similar way that we would approach a General Tso's chicken, in that we develop this really, really crisp piece of chicken when we do General Tso's chicken, and then we throw that into a really, really deeply thickened and like savory braised sauce, which is what we're going to do next. Do I press the tofu to remove some water? You can absolutely do that if you're worried about oil splattering or for a number of reasons. I did not do that, mostly because I just don't feel like doing that. That's more work than I want to do. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. It would definitely help avoid a lot of oil splattering. It would also add probably a good solid 5-6 minutes to the cook time, because squeezing water out of tofu is not just a one-time thing. You have to do it like 5 or 6 times before you get all of that water out, and even then you don't necessarily get all of the water out. So the advantage being that if you were to do that, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, it's also a very, very useful and important technique, but if you were to squeeze all of that water out, what would happen is you would be able to retain a lot more heat in the oil, because the oil isn't going to expend as much time and energy burning off water, which is what's happening. Basically what's happening right now is just burning off all of that water. So in order, if you were to take the time to press out all of that water, instead of spending all of its energy burning off that water, the oil would be frying your tofu. And number one, that would make it fry quicker, but number two, it would also get you a crispier piece of tofu because it has more energy going into crisping up the tofu. The only real reason why I skipped that part is because I don't feel like doing that. That's going to take more time, and I just didn't feel like doing it. So, but if you're on a hunt for developing the crispiest piece of tofu, that's definitely the first thing that you should do. Is press that water out. All right. So we're on our second batch of tofu here. I'm letting this go for a little bit. You'll notice that there is some like flaky bits going on here. That's not the end of the world. What that is bits and pieces of our first batch sort of attaching to the second batch of tofu, and that's essentially like stuff carbonizing and burning. It's not the end of the world. You don't have to throw it out and start over again. But if you want to avoid that from happening, what you would need to do is filter out the oil and make sure that you have clean oil going on in your. I don't like doing that, mostly because it seems wasteful and I would have to use more oil in order to do that. Alright. So just like with our first batch, I'm paying attention to the sides of our tofu here. So right here, all of this crisping up that's happening on the edges of our tofu. That's generally a sign that we're getting nice deep crisping going on. And that's what we're looking for when we're trying to flip our tofu over. Alright. There we go. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. And as always, anytime that you're frying stuff away from you, you're going to flip it in this direction. And that's just going to make sure that you don't splash oil back onto yourself, which happens to me more times than I care to admit. As always, flip in this direction. Oops. I lost one. Away from you. This piece is broken. We lost one. Tofu Tuesday, yeah, more or less. Live streaming Tuesday. We're here streaming every Tuesday though, by the way, so if you're looking for the live streams, that's when these are going to pop up, every Tuesday. We used to stream on Thursday too, but I actually need to phase that date out because we're moving our prep day over there. So lots of times, probably more often now, I'll probably start live streaming on Thursdays, but I won't have the mics though, so it'll probably just be me chopping a whole bunch of shit. So making the largest quantity of fried rice that you will have ever seen. Yeah. So these are getting there. You can definitely see that browning going on now. Yeah, tofu, it always blows out the camera, the white balance on our stove cameras. That happens every time I cook tofu. Yeah, you can see it a little bit better on Reddit, but that might just be because the screen is smaller. I think it's bad on both cameras. But yeah, you could kind of see, you could get a little bit of that nice. There we go. Yeah. We have one piece of tofu down. One of them broke. It will be. It's always fun. All right. A little bit longer on this. Yeah. Your tofu never looks this good. Yeah, I'm glad that it looks good. I'd like to help you make your tofu look better, though. But yeah, that is actually one of the inspirations for the series that we're doing, which is essentially, we started this whole series that's dedicated to vegetarian recipes. And mostly that's because I've seen so many terrible vegetarian recipes that just are like bland food, which is like why the misconception exists that vegetarian food is terrible. And that's, I feel like the reason for that is because the American preparation of tofu is just like the worst ways of preparing tofu. When in actuality, and I believe that is because the way that American food prepares vegetarian tofu is because it's trying to make tofu taste like meat, which is a big problem. Because tofu doesn't taste like meat. It doesn't even behave like meat, which means that you have to approach it super differently. And you can't use it as if it were a meat substitute because it's not going to behave the same way, which is why you end up with so many like super bland preparations of tofu. But in a lot of Chinese food, there's a lot of recipes that are specifically dedicated for tofu, which is what we're doing today is one of them. And these recipes are oftentimes specifically designed for the preparation of tofu, which means that we have all of these very, very unique ways of cooking tofu, which is not like the way that you would see chicken done. So, for example, if we were cooking chicken right now, I would never do this with a piece of chicken. If we were doing this with a piece of chicken, it would have overcooked like 20 minutes ago. You can't cook a piece of raw chicken in a shallow fry, not without a breading because it would overcook so quickly. All right, so very carefully, what I'm going to do, very carefully, is pour out this oil. So very important. We got all this oil in here. It is not as much oil as we started with, but this is still more oil than you want to go down your sink here. So super, super important. Don't let this stuff fall into your sink. Don't just dump it into the trash. So definitely don't dump it into the trash can because it will burn through your trash can. And then you're going to have a leaky garbage bag, which is not good. But also don't dump it down the sink because this stuff will clog your sink. And that is the reason why many people clog their sinks when they fry stuff. It's because they dump their cooking oil down the sink, which is not smart. So what I have, you can almost, it's more or less catching on the camera. This is just a jar that I use to dump oil into. Carefully. Like so. And then I usually will dump this out every time that I dump out my fryer oil. Which is often, because we fry a lot. Alright, so last up before we move on to our stir fry, I'm rinsing out my wok. As you might imagine, there's a lot of grime that kind of accumulates over the course of a shallow fry, so you can even see some of it still sticking here. We want to get all that stuff out of our wok before we move on. Otherwise, that stuff is going to end up in your stir fry. You're going to have little bits and pieces of burnt tofu floating around. So I got my wok. It's just rinsed out. We're going to let this burn off all of that residual water, and then we can start cooking. Meanwhile, we can take a look. Here's our finished tofu one more time. Nice and crispy. We have all of this really, really crisp up edges, which is what we're looking for here. All of that water has been pulled out. If we were really committed, we could have done that with a little bit of tofu pressing, but I didn't. So here we are. All right. So back over on the stove, we're going to pour out the last bit of water. I'm letting that wok reheat. That should take another like maybe 30 seconds or so. And then we can start our stir fry. You'll notice that, by the way, at this point, so we've been streaming for almost an hour now. The rest of this stir fry is going to happen in maybe like 5 minutes or so, and that's because wok frying happens so quickly. That's why it's also, by the way, super, super important to get everything else done before you start cooking. So no more chopping garlic. We don't want to be carrot peeling. We don't want to be mixing sauces, any of that stuff. That should all be done at this point. You should now just have bowls of stuff that's going into the wok and being ready to go. We call that mise en place. Yeah. Yeah, air fryer tofu is awesome. Yeah, I've had like hit or miss results with air frying tofu, and I'm not actually sure why. I'm not sure why sometimes it doesn't work. So, Dwayne the Wok Johnson, it's great. Cool. All right, one more time. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Wusiu Tofu, which is a Chinese crispy piece of tofu that's done in a dark soy sauce and oyster sauce braise. We're here streaming every Tuesday with new recipes out every Friday over on my YouTube channel. So over on YouTube, we have the short recipes out every Monday. Music, so the Wu Cooks beats are every Wednesday, and the long form recipes every Friday. So if you're interested in that stuff, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check that out. This is part of a new recipe series that we've been doing that's dedicated to actually good vegetarian recipes, which are very, very common in a lot of Chinese food. You'll see lots of vegetarian or tofu preparation in Chinese food. So stuff like that, all living over on the YouTube channel if you're interested. We're working our way up to 6,000 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please help. We love subscribers. All right, so into the wok. That's 4 tablespoons of grapeseed oil, I think, right now. Because we still don't have peanut oil. Yeah, cool. And then going in first, our aromatics that we started out with. This is our garlic, followed by our ginger. And finally, this is the whites of our green onions. And then I'm going to let this bloom for about seconds. What we're looking for here is some fragrance. So when you start smelling garlic and ginger and green onions, that's when you know you're in a good spot. All right, then first up, before we do anything else, I'm adding my carrots here. So I like to give the carrots a little bit of a head start. Not a huge head start, but because carrots are so dense, I find that it's useful to let them hit the wok a little bit earlier than your other veggies. So today that's going to be our shiitake mushrooms and our tofu. And that partly is going to be assisted by the fact that we chop them into thin. But because carrots are a very, very dense vegetable, we generally, anytime that we're using tofu, or carrots, excuse me, we want to give them a little bit of a head start so that we don't end up with like crunchy or sometimes even raw carrots sitting around in our tofu or stir fry, which is not good. If you've ever eaten a carrot that's undercooked, you know what I mean. All right. So I'm gonna give that maybe will take about a minute, maybe a minute and a half of a head start before we move on here. You toast your tofu in a saucepan. Yeah, you could do that too. I just find it takes a little bit more oil. With anything flat bottom, you're going to take a little bit more oil than you would be able to do in a round bottom. Yeah. Yeah. Guilty American, yeah. But my experience with air frying tofu has always been really hit or miss. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I can't tell if it's because it doesn't have a breading or not. A lot of times when I work with air fryers, what ends up happening is it comes out really, really crispy and it's like amazing. And then like 30 to 45 minutes later, it becomes really, really limp and just sort of kind of like a cold stir fry, which shouldn't be happening. And I'm not honestly sure if that's because I'm air frying wrong or if it's because that's just how air frying works. So I'm not sure. Maybe I should experiment with that more though. All right, so here's our carrots. I'm gonna follow that up. There's our shiitake mushrooms going in. Then next is our crisped tofu. Followed finally by our braising liquid. And usually what I like to do is follow that up with a little bit of water. So this is going to be about a cup or so of water. And then maybe that's like a quarter cup, because I forgot that we're also going to follow this up with, here's our reserved shiitake mushroom water. And then we're going to give this a little bit of a turn. At this point, especially when that tofu is in the wok, we want to be very careful with our tossing at this point. So I'm not going to go in the shoveling stuff around in here anymore. We want to make sure that we don't break apart that tofu here. Otherwise, you're going to end up with fractured bits and pieces of tofu, which is not what we're after. Favorite thing to cook in an air fryer? Oh, that's definitely going to be lumpia or egg rolls, which I've had the best results with is in getting crispy pieces of anything crispy out of an air fryer. Has either been lumpia or egg rolls, and I think that has to do with the way that the dough and like the wrapper of an egg roll is because it's so thin. You get the best results and like get it to stay crispy the longest. Most often though, like super often, I'll air fry something and it like French fries. I know I've done French fries at one point, or essentially like potatoes. I've air fried potatoes in an attempt to get French fries, and that always ends up being like a little bit like pretty limp and like kind of floppy after like maybe like 10, 20 or 30 minutes or so, and then it just starts going floppy. I don't really know what I'm doing wrong. Could just because I'm not very and don't know how to use an air fryer. Maybe that's probably it. Frying pan, yeah. Saucepan would be. Yeah, saucepan would be weird. I kind of just assumed you meant frying pan. All right. So we don't need a super long braise here. We're not really trying to impart anything. Mostly we're just waiting for those carrots to become tender here. The last thing that we're going to add here, this is our cornstarch slurry. So I just assembled this off here. I forgot. But this is 2 tablespoons of cornstarch mixed with water, and this thing that we add to our stir fry to sort of just thicken it up. I kind of think of it in the way that you would use like pasta water in a lot of Italian food, where that extra starch is going to be added to our sauce base to help us develop this really like nice, thick, and luxurious sauce in the way that you would use pasta water and things like carbonara and bolognese. It kind of thickens the sauce up a little bit. Yeah, what are the ingredients? Yes, so in our saute right now, that's some firm tofu, plus that was 2 or 3 carrots, and then some shiitake mushrooms, some of the big ones. And then our aromatics, that was garlic, ginger, and then the whites of the green onions. The other thing that we still have reserved are the greens of our green onions, which will be used as garnish. And actually, I think the way that I had done it in the original recipe that came out Friday was as planks. Those green onions were supposed to be planks. I think I chopped them wrong, but here we are. Yeah, those carrots need a little bit longer. They're still a little bit crunchy. Ooh, that's super tasty though otherwise. So at this point, we're not really doing a whole lot in that braise. I'm mostly just letting those carrots cook all the way through. We could have even, I guess, let them stir fry a little bit longer. Like I mentioned before, the carrots, because they're so dense, need a little bit of a head start before your other ingredients in order to become tender. Yeah. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday. We're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on my YouTube channel every Friday. So today we're cooking through the recipe that came out on the channel last Friday, which is for a Wusiu Tofu, which comes from Chinese cuisine, which is essentially a crispy piece of tofu that is braised in a long braise. It's not a super long braise, maybe a 10-minute braise or so. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely head over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. What I have always found interesting about a Wusiu Tofu is that it is very, very similar to the way that you would do shao tofu, which as far as I can tell is the only difference is that the way that the tofu is fried is slightly different. So shao tofu being a breaded and deep fried piece of tofu, Wusiu Tofu being a crispy piece of shallow fried tofu. As far as I can tell, I believe that is how it is done. I hope I'm not wrong. As far as I can tell, the internet is not really clear or sure of how it's done either. You digging the tunes? Thanks, Paul. Yeah. By the way, I also finally remembered and got around to updating the music that's playing under my voiceover. We'll also spin through those at the end of this stream too. All of those beats, they all live over on the YouTube channel, the Wu Cooks Beats YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that stuff, it's here. So yeah, lots of thanks for reminding me to mention that. That's the Wu Cooks Beats channel. All of those beats live over there, and they're all remixes too. So if you're looking for that stuff, lots of cool stuff coming up over there. Those are also out every Wednesday too. So and they also on the Shorts channel of the Wu Can Cook channel. They're out every Wednesday too. So lots of fun stuff going on. All right, so there's our cornstarch slurry. Very important when you add cornstarch slurry. It's got to go into the center. Dead center of the wok. We don't want that going around the sides, which is going to be your instinct, is to put that around the sides. But if you let it go around the sides, what's going to happen is it's going to make contact with this cooking surface, and then it's going to cook. You're going to have cooked cornstarch, which is not good. We don't want that to happen because it's going to start frying pieces of cornstarch going on, which is not attractive. So you might notice as soon as we added that cornstarch, our sauce just sort of thickened up a lot more. We have this nice rich and thick quality to our sauce base, which as before it was a little bit liquidy, more of a watery quality to it, which is not what we're after. All right, that looks good. So at this point, if you want, you could let this braise as long as you want. You could let this go for 2 whole hours. It will start even tasting a lot better at that point too. I really am just looking for these carrots, mostly because I just start eating. But yeah, as always, as with anything that's braised, we want to give that as much time as possible because it's just going to get better. And then the last thing that we want to do anytime that we're cooking in carbon steel, give that wok a nice rinse while it's still hot, and then everything should, if you've done it correctly, come right off of that wok. And that's going to save you a lot of time when you're cleaning and doing dishes later. What I like to do when I finish cleaning that wok is just throw it back on the fire, and that's just going to evaporate some of this leftover water or residual water for us. Great with water chestnuts, yeah. There's a lot, by the way. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. There are a lot of different ways that you can throw in here, or throw in and adapt a Wusiu tofu. Same with the shao tofu. You could use in the shao tofu we use bok choy, which is a really great option. You could use water chestnuts, very good option. And you could use bamboo shoots. Anytime they use water chestnuts, you could also use bamboo shoots. Always a good choice. Any kind of vegetable. You could go American and just start throwing in like bell peppers. Any vegetable that you can think of that would end up in a stir fry would go nicely here. All right. Rice is blown out a little bit too. So I think, in my opinion at least, what's making this a tasty recipe is not that we're trying to impart flavor to the tofu, because the tofu, as I think the biggest mistake that everybody tries to do with tofu is to try and make it taste like something, which is never going to happen. Because it's tofu, it's bland. That's the nature of tofu. But what's really important with a dish like this is that the sauce has to stick to the tofu. If it doesn't stick to the tofu, then you just have a bland piece of tofu sort of floating around your bowl, which is not what we're after. So that's sort of like the quality that I'm looking for here is that when we put the sauce on top of the tofu, what happens to it? Does it sort of just like slide off, or do we have this nice sauce cohesion going on? All right, so last up, I'm finishing. This is our greens of our green onions, which I believe was supposed to be chopped into planks, but here we are. All right, that should do it. Do I use the green part of the... Oh, this chat just cut off. Do I use the green part and leaf of the bok choy? No, yeah, you Paul definitely used the whole piece of the bok choy. The leafy part, in my opinion, is the best part. They do definitely... the way I have always treated bok choy is that it's just sort of kind of behaves similar to the way that like spinach behaves. Is that leafy part is going to wilt in the stir fry, which means that when you use bok choy, it's gonna look like you're using an absurd amount of bok choy, because it's just gonna, like, the surface area is going to overfill the wok. But as it sort of starts wilting, it's gonna lose all of that volume, and then you're gonna have what looks like a more appropriate amount of bok choy. So that's always the thing that I want to keep in mind when we use bok choy, is that take into account that the volume is just going to shrink down a whole bunch because of that leafy quality to it. Ooh, yeah, you saying the written recipes? Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, if you don't have a wok, you can still totally do most of these things. I was cooking most of these recipes in a cast iron skillet for a long time. And then after that, I had a cast iron wok, which was really useful because I was cooking on an electric top range. Anything that is capable of reaching high heat is going to be useful. So if you're in the skillet world, cast iron skillet is going to be great. You could use a stainless steel skillet too. Carbon steel skillet would be my favorite choice. If you're on a gas range, or if you're on an electric range, a cast iron skillet would be my first choice. And honestly, any of those will work. Probably the main difference being that as it sort of starts filling up, and as you like approach the end of the dish, once everything's in the wok, you're probably going to start overflowing with stuff, which is not the end of the world. It's not that you don't have to worry about underheating at that point. If you've done the batch cooking properly and if you follow the recipe properly, you shouldn't be worried about things underheating at that point. It's basically just going to make a mess because stuff is going to start falling out of the wok. Out of your frying pan, because you don't have the high edges of the wok to kind of like keep things in, which is the reason why woks are much larger than most of the things that you're cooking in it. So, ooh, a reasonably priced wok for your Christmas list. So all of these woks, if you're here in Oakland, these all come from Chenko in Oakland, which is on I think 7th and Franklin, something like that. Chenko is a restaurant supply store, so lots of people ask me where I get this wok, and I have no idea where it's from. It has no branding on it whatsoever. But I do get it at Chenko. It's a restaurant supply store. If you're not in Oakland, most of the time, if you're near a Chinatown district, you will find something similar to Chenko, which is essentially the store that's supplying cookware to the restaurants that are in the Chinatown area. You want to remember that Chinese people are not ordering stuff on Amazon. They're getting that stuff somewhere. So just look around. Wherever you see Chinese restaurants, you'll probably see Chinese restaurant supply stores too. And that's where you'll get like the cheapest woks. This wok, I think I own 6 of these woks because we use 5 of them in our pop-up, and I think I got them all for like $15 a piece or something. So like I think I spent under $100 on 6 woks. So so lots of cool stuff. If you could find a restaurant supply store, that's probably your best place to go. And at that restaurant supply store, you'll be able to find like basically everything that you need for wok cooking, which is like the stuff that I see people selling in like bundles. So like the metal spatulas, the wok lid, all of these things, spiders, wok rings, all that stuff, you're gonna find it a lot more affordably if you find yourself a restaurant supply store. I do know that lots of people are not able to find a restaurant supply store because you might not live near a Chinatown district. So I have also heard, and I've actually used it a decent amount now. A buddy of mine has the Joyce Chen carbon steel wok, which is a good one. I believe it's Joyce Chen, and it's a flat bottom carbon steel wok, which I think is important. By the way, if you are like just getting into wok cooking and are not familiar with how a rounded bottom wok behaves, you probably want to start with a flat bottom wok, which is actually the first 3 or 4 woks that I cooked on were flat bottomed, because it's going to act a little bit more similarly to how a frying pan would behave, because it has that nice flat bottom for you, so you don't have to worry about your wok sort of like rolling around like that. You don't have to worry about it falling off the stovetop, which has happened to me more times than I like to admit. So I would say, like, as far as brands go, look for a restaurant supply store. If you can't find one, the Joyce Chen wok is really great. And if you don't go for that, honestly, anything that's made out of carbon steel would be my first bet. Unless you're cooking on electric top or induction top, then in that case, anything made out of cast iron is going to be really great. Yeah. Oh, Paul, yeah, it's widely available, but you're afraid to use it so far. Yeah, definitely get into bok choy. My favorite, anytime, I say this all the time, anytime that we cook with bok choy, but anytime that you see me using bok choy, what I'm actually using is what you'll see referred to as baby bok choy. So if you're intimidated, if you're at a Chinese grocery store and you're not sure what to buy, it's pretty obvious because it will be next to another piece of bok choy that looks similar, but it's a different color, and it's just a lot larger. So full-grown bok choy that's the stuff that you see in like statues and stuff, because I have no idea why, but Chinese people think that full-grown bok choy is lucky. Oh, I think it's because it's the color of jade, and that's lucky. I think it like represents wealth or something. I don't know. In Chinese culture, everything's lucky. Anyway, full-grown bok choy, that's the thing that you like associate with like iconic bok choy. That's the stuff that I never buy, because when it's full-grown, it gets really, really bitter. But as a baby, like baby bok choy, it's like half the size, and it's a lot sweeter and a little bit like crispier, not quite as like chewy. And that's the stuff that I'll always buy. And that usually the stalks will be a little bit whiter, and the leaves will be a little bit green, like darker green. That's the stuff that you want, and it's going to be a little bit more tasty, and kind of like less of an acquired taste. I think that full-grown bok choy is a real acquired taste because it's like super bitter. Yeah, cool. But yeah, good luck. Let me know. Let me know if you get into bok choy and how it goes for you. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on my YouTube channel every Friday. So today we just finished cooking through the recipe that came out on the channel last Friday, which is a Wusiu Tofu, which is a Chinese stir fry that uses a very, very crisp up piece of tofu that has been long braised in a wok fry. For this like really, really saucy piece of tofu that's also really crispy. Kind of reminds me of the way that you would do like any kind of like Chinese American fried chicken from Chinese food. So like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, all of those things. Same approach, that we're getting this really, really crispy piece of fried chicken. Then we're throwing it back into the wok in a glaze and just sort of tossing it in that glaze. And then you get this nice like saucy piece of crisped up protein, which is essentially what Wusiu Tofu is. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely head over to the YouTube channel, check out what's going on over there. We're working our way up to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the month, the end of the year, I guess. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over, give it a subscribe. Lots of fun stuff coming up every Friday. So this Friday, I'm super excited. This Friday, we're coming out with something that's way out of my comfort zone. But I did a pie, a chocolate hapio pie, which comes from Hawaiian cuisine. It was actually the pie that I made for Thanksgiving dinner. It's a really, really great one if you're looking for a pie ideas to do or dessert ideas to do for Christmas. That's a really fun one. And also, it's pretty approachable. I don't think there's maybe one ingredient that's a little bit tricky to find, but if you're in relatively close to anything remotely Asian, you should be able to find it. It uses coconut cream, which is a little bit hard to locate. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you soon. Definitely hop over to the YouTube channel. We'll be back on next Tuesday we're going to be doing lapchang carbonara because I'm not cooking a hapio cream pie on live stream. So we're going to do the lapchang carbonara, which was definitely a fan favorite. That one's part of a Chinese fusion series that we've been doing, where I've been smashing together Chinese ingredients with a lot of things that come from Western culture, in this case Italian culture. So stuff like that coming up very soon. All right, thanks everyone. See you soon. Bye. Tastes like strawberries on a summer evening, and it sounds just like a song. I want more berries and that summer feeling. It's so wonderful and warm. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if I could ever go without watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar high, watermelon sugar. Strawberries on a summer evening, baby, you're the end of June. I want your